For example, a couple of days ago, my own sister was asking me, Itwa, what is the new tax policy? How does it affect us? So I told my tax research team here in SIO to give me a 2-page summary of what the tax policy is. We already have it, and they're developing it and this and that. So it's very interesting that today we're speaking on the tax policies, its impact on citizens and the economy. And if we can summarize the outcomes of this discussion, it will tell everybody exactly what is going on. So this fora is to inform and to educate. And I like to say quite a lot of people have been informed, they have benefited, they have been educated by what we have said, and they keep this going. We're hoping that in October, we can have an intergenerational conversation where the elderly ones can have a discourse with the youth and see how we can bring parties together to work together for a better Nigeria. Anybody who knows me knows that I believe in Nigeria. I'm hopeful for Nigeria. I do believe that Nigeria is the best country in the whole world because of its people, the intellectual capacity of its people, and the abundance of resources that it has. What makes a nation great is the capacity of its people. The only problem is that you don't have a majority of people of capacity. They are there. What is missing is their education, their knowledge, their information, their empowerment, the new thinking. Wherever some are able to break that barrier into a barrier of new thinking, they have done phenomenal things. And that is why we keep this going. That is why we keep this going. The fourth reason why we do the ALG is so that if there's any one of you out there that wants to join, I just finished talking to my friend on the phone, Pastor Ibrahim Abachi. He's very interested, very excited, especially about what former Vice President Adeyemi just said a few weeks ago at Bishop Mike's 80th birthday. And he's thinking, how can we get this together? How can we keep it going? So that's the fourth thing. Who wants to volunteer? Who wants to be part of this thing? Who wants to be part of working together with or without government to build a new Nigeria? I am committed to this cause, not just in Nigeria, but all over Africa. And that's why we have a Ghanaian series, we have a Kenyan series, we have our South African series, and very soon we start a series in North Africa, and we begin to snowball the thing and hope that one day Africa would indeed be free. We're working a lot in the diaspora with our VC there, Jumoke Akintelo, who is doing phenomenally well and doing a really, really great job. Jumoke, I salute you, and I hope that we can get the diaspora moving. Don't be discouraged. I know you're a bit discouraged because there was a bit of work and effort done in the diaspora some time ago. And as usual, something came and scuttled it. We must keep trying. We must keep trying. I must keep trying again. The children of Israel did not leave Egypt at the first try. They left after many, many tries. And eventually they got to the promised land. Our discussion today is a man who's an associate director with Anderson, Nigeria. Anderson used to be in Nigeria as a professional services firm. Something happened, they left, and now they've come back. And their main focus now is on tax. I do believe it's the same Anderson, and I stand to be corrected when our speaker comes on. And they've been doing phenomenally well. And in the few short years they've been in the space, they've become one of the leaders in tax and tax consulting in Nigeria. Very aggressive, very dynamic, very well informed. So please welcome with me Mr. Oladejo Adeyemi, an associate director in the commercial practice group at Anderson, Nigeria. His years of experience cover corporate tax planning, personal income tax planning, as well as managing transaction taxes as dispute resolution. He was with one of the big four before joining Anderson, and I can feel his passion for taxation. He has a BSc Agriculture and from the Federal University of Agriculture. He also has an MSc from the Federal University of Agriculture. And he went to University of San Francisco to study taxation with an MBA in view. is an associate member of my institute, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, Mr. Oladejo Adeyemi. I'm happy to welcome you here.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Pastor, I should say, if that's permissible in this forum.
Very permissible. It's too late
Okay,
for me to
fantastic.
deny that title. So that's very
Fantastic.
okay.
All right, sir.
God bless you.
Thanks for
Thank you
having me.
for agreeing to speak to us. And
Thank
thank
you,
you for
sir.
all the work that you've done in taxation. I don't want
Thank you.
to assume that everybody on this forum today knows what taxation is and is familiar. They may know, they may have heard about it, but I like to start at the foundation. So maybe you can give us a little bit of a background. What is taxation? What's all this business of taxation? In
Okay.
America, the fear of Uncle Sam is the beginning of wisdom. We don't have Uncle Sam here. Maybe we have Uncle Bola. But
Yeah.
but taxation
Okay.
is taxation. So maybe you
Okay.
just want to give a big background, a little bit of history, and a little
Okay.
bit of what taxation is and what people do with taxation. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Once again, thanks so much for inviting me to this platform, Pastor Etua. And I'm starting on a note of thanks again, appreciating the good work that Africa Leadership Group, is doing. You've been a mentor, even though it's from afar, but everyone who is conversant with the story of this nation would at one point or the other have been in contact with your very good work. And I'm very excited to be here. And I thank you sincerely for sharing this platform, with me to hear my view. So very briefly, like you've mentioned, I think your assumption that maybe not everybody knows about tax, may be correct. Because there are people, especially for the kind of country that we live in, where citizens essentially strive to do everything, for themselves, essentially most of the basic things, so it might be a reality that some people are not quite conversant with what the expectation should be with respect to tax. The saying is generally correct that aside from death, the other thing that should also be certain, is tax. That saying, of course, it's a general saying. It applies everywhere. Whether or not it applies absolutely in the Nigerian situation is another kettle of fish altogether. But tax really is that necessary levy, that every citizen ordinarily should pay towards the advancement of their country, towards the running of the country. Tax revenue essentially is one of the major sources of revenue that government depends on, to be able to deliver some of the basic services or whatever expectations that citizens may have, from the government. Again, I would say that it is a social contract from what I've described. Social contract in the sense that when citizens pay their taxes, right, the expectation is that government then judiciously utilize those taxes to be able for the citizens to be able to benefit certain things. Now, the Nigerian story has been a bit or significantly bedeviled with some level of difference, because in our case, you then see situations where citizens pay their taxes, right? But some of the other side of that contract, which is from the government side, we've seen government from time immemorial in the country that failing from those areas. And if you take a poll, for instance, on this call, how many people have their bowl? How many people are using public water amongst us? You'll find out that the count may be quite surprising. In some states, maybe public water isn't even working anymore. I'm aware that in some areas in Lagos, public water may be working, but the proportion of those depending on public water, for instance, would be quite infinitesimal when you look at the generality of the people, And then when you also talk about roads, some of us that live in some areas, we are very familiar with community people having to team up, come together to contribute for interlocking, stones, fix their road, even asphalt and all of that. So to the extent that citizens continue to delve into these areas, it then makes the trust or the expectation from government kind of become invincible. Not that those things are not there, because sometimes people make statements that are too generalized. Say Nigeria is not working. I'm also very passionate about Nigeria, like Pastor Igodalo, but you hear things like it's a failed state, and sometimes I correct them to say it's not. The police, for instance, it's an institution. They can't go on strike. Imagine if that just happens for a day. So government still depends on tax revenue to be able to cater to these areas that we may not be, even though it may not be as prominent as we wanted or as we desired or as it should be, for the Nigerian story. But essentially, those revenues are the sources that government depends on, among others, to be able to deliver on those services. So I would stop here because it's just a general remark with respect to what taxation is about and what taxes are, so that we can then take a deeper dive from here. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Maybe just to add a little bit of this, how did you yourself get involved in tax, and what was the motivation to get you into the tax business? You are an agricultural graduate. Maybe we need you back in the farm. I don't know, in Nigeria. Instead of you go and teach farm.
Okay.
And then you seem to have some legal studies in taxation. So give me an idea how you got into this tax business.
Okay, interesting.
What may have happened, but let me hear it.
Okay, interesting. So like I had mentioned that I'm also very passionate about the country. So I was looking at in what area would I be able to contribute, my quota. So at the time when I finished my first degree, the opportunity then came to take up a job in the accounting role, and at that point, colleagues were focusing on the areas of interest, being standard audit and all of that. But I looked at the field of taxation. I felt it's quite a robust field, that would allow you be able to add more value in terms of value that is palpable, So I decided to say I would stay on that field. Interestingly, I said I was going to give you 5 years because I remember when the partner that interviewed me then, it was like, okay, you've done masters in your first degree. Why didn't you want to continue? And I said I decided I was going to give you 5 years and see what it would look like. And 5 years turned to 10 turned to 15, and this is where I am. So that's my brief story, Pastor Etua.
5 years turned to 10 years.
and 10 is going to 15 already.
That's what they say to you when you are getting married. Don't worry.
All right. Sir.
That's on day one. You will see how it goes. Before you know, you come and say, when you open your mouth, you say, close. But for you, I guess not just is that the cash also came a little.
Exactly. You're right.
And the group and the partnership came. Yeah,
absolutely.
That somebody persuaded you to join an accounting firm, and before you knew it, they were moving you up and down here and everywhere. Yeah, well done. So we're going to be showing a video in another minute or so. Some interview with Mr. Oyedele, who is trying to handle the fiscal and the policy environment of our taxation. And we'll just show it briefly. It's a 6-minute video, but we might not show all the 6 minutes. And then we'll have you speak to the tax policies that we have, what the old policies, the slight comparison between the old policies and the new policies, and then what you think this government is trying to achieve with the new policies, and what innocent people like me should watch out for. Thank you. The video, please.
Stop the rumors. Here's the truth from the man who wrote the reforms. Thank you very much, Mr. Oyedele. Are all Nigerians now going to be paying more taxes under the new law?
No. Majority of Nigerians, more than 97%, will pay less taxes. Only the top 2-3% will pay slightly more.
Will market women and small traders now pay daily taxes?
No. The taxes they have been paying currently are so many and the burden is so high. Under the new law, they will not have to pay income tax, they won't have to charge VAT, no withholding tax, and the taxes they have to pay to local government and state, we're currently harmonizing them so they are limited to about 1 or 2.
Has the government started taxing rents, especially residential rents?
There has always been a provision in the law for people who own properties to pay tax on their rent. These new laws have not imposed new taxes. What we're trying to do is to make sure that those who have properties and rent pay the taxes they're supposed to pay under the law as part of their personal income tax.
So did you introduce new personal income tax rates?
No, we did not introduce new personal income tax rates. What we did was a reform of the personal income tax table and taxable income. 1, to eliminate taxes for low-income earners. 2, to reduce taxes for middle-income earners. 3, marginally increase the taxes for high net worth individuals.
Will small businesses be forced to start charging VAT?
Small businesses that were even charging VAT before are now exempted because the threshold for not charging VAT for small businesses have now been increased. They also won't have to worry about PAYE on the salary of their staff. They will not have to worry about withholding taxes. As a matter of fact, more than 98% of small businesses have now been exempted from a lot of taxes that they used to pay before.
Is it true that every online transaction will now be taxed?
No, it is not true that every online transaction will now be taxed. The taxes you pay is a function of what you do online. What we try to do is to make sure that you do not gain any undue advantage by operating online, the same way that you are not disadvantaged by operating online compared to someone doing their businesses offline. So if, for example, you provide professional services online and you make a lot of money, you pay the same tax that the person who is doing professional services is doing from their mom and pop shop. So this is about equality, it's about fairness and a level playing field.
Are you bringing back fuel subsidies through hidden taxes?
What we have is that there's a law that was enacted some years back with a surcharge on fuel under the FEMA Act. This is a provision that is now in the new tax law, and it does not take effect as of January 2026. I know some people have been giving wrong information about this. What is in the new tax law is that this surcharge will take effect on a date in the future based on an order to be released by the Minister of Finance. And we do know that Minister of Finance is responsible enough to determine when it's appropriate to do so. The intention is to earmark and dedicate the revenue from this tax into providing transport infrastructure that can reduce the cost of transporting items, logistics, and overall bring down inflation for the Nigerian people.
Do these laws give FIRS the power to seize people's accounts without warning?
No, nobody would do that. It would be unconstitutional to seize people's assets, including their bank accounts, without warning. Under the new tax laws, there are requirements for financial institutions, including banks, to make some reports depending on the volume of transaction. And once you have anything in your bank account or anywhere on which you have declared honestly, nobody will seize your account. But if you have tax liabilities to pay and you refuse to pay them, there were provisions in the old laws, as they are in the new one, for the taxman to take over your asset to recover the taxes that you owe. This is not peculiar to Nigeria. It's a provision you find in all tax laws across the world.
Does this mean new taxes on school fees and hospital bills?
There are no new taxes on school fees and hospital bills. In fact, what we've done is to remove the taxes we had previously on school fees and hospital bills. Not only is it that you will not pay taxes on those transactions, if you are into the business of running a school or a hospital and you have to, for example, pay value-added tax on the motor vehicle or school bus, on laptops, on mobile phone, everything that you incur VAT on, under the new regime, you get a refund of those taxes you pay. Not only is it that the tuition is tax-free, the cost of providing the education is equally tax-free. To be honest, under this new tax law, it's hard to find who pays more, because even the rich people that will pay a little bit more in terms of their personal income tax, they are gaining the benefits from their businesses, because most of the high net worth individuals run businesses. So the little amount they pay more from personal income tax, they benefit from the relief that their businesses will get. Overall, nobody should pay more tax under this new tax law. Government will make its own revenue from blocking evasion, blocking leakages, growing the economy. The more economic activities we have, the more prosperity you have around, the more tax revenue you can generate. These reforms were not set out to generate more revenue by extorting or extracting from the people. Rather, it's to simplify life and stimulate economic growth and shared prosperity. So don't believe the noise, don't run with the headlines, believe the numbers and the facts. You're entitled to not just your opinion, your informed opinion. So we encourage you, anytime in doubt, look for credible sources, including the fiscalreforms.ng website. We also have social media accounts where we have videos, explainers. We encourage you to follow that, get credible information, be informed, and do the right thing. God bless Nigeria.
The myths have been put out there. The facts have cleared your myths. You have just heard it from the man who helped to design
God bless Nigeria indeed. God bless Nigeria indeed. And I think Mr. Odele did a very good job there of breaking it down. Well, maybe you can now look at the old tax, the new tax, the comparison from a very narrow point of view. I'm a bit even worried that it seems as though we're going to be earning less tax revenue. 98% of the poor people seem to have been totally exempt from tax. In Nigeria, where people were not accountable before, people now can hide and tell all of us that they're small businesses. Some of my brothers from the East, they don't have any shop, they don't have anything, or they have a very small shop, but they have big bank accounts. How do you decide whether they are small business or not? And so on and so forth. So I think you've given a lot of people, or they have given people a lot of places where to hide and this and that. So I need to know how government is thinking and what the effect of this new tax regime is going to be. And not only that, you may want to speak to the administration thereof. It's not that there are no laws and things. What is a little bit missing is true and fair and sincere and hardworking administration of this of tax and so on and so forth. Over to you. And shortly after that, we'll be taking some Q&As. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks a lot, Pastor Etua. Like you mentioned, there's a lot to be expected. But let's start from the basic. There's a saying that if you want to hide anything from an African, just put it in the book, right? That you can be sure that it won't be read and it won't be discovered. So I think the first challenge is we have a population of people who genuinely and truly do not read. And even though we are trying to address the issues or the challenges is being addressed now, the government is trying to address it now. It didn't start now. And that's why anyone who is involved in this conversation must appreciate how we got here. Remember, I mentioned at the point when I started that tax is a social contract. In a situation where someone has been beaten and battered, or you've been hitting somebody's high over and over and over again, there's a Yoruba proverb that Yoruba people will say, but I don't want to say the proverb here. People have been beaten and battered by non-performance from the other side, which is the side of the government. So much so that there's been some sort of understanding that, you know what, government, I won't bother you. You just be on your side at some income bracket and layer of the economy. Just keep to your side. Don't provide me with the road. Don't provide me with the water. And I, as citizen, I would also fend for myself. So there is a huge level of disconnect between when a typical citizen should pay taxes and when the citizen should not. In fact, some of the provisions that you have in this new law, right, or laws, I should say, because there are about 4 of them, I'm going to talk about them. Some of them have been existing for a while, but the challenge is they have been made redundant by practice. One thing is to have the law, and that's the second part of the point you wanted me to talk about, which I will come back to when I'm done with this part. The other thing is what has been obtainable. So in the first instance, we have a population of people who generally do not care. That's laxity. You have people really not knowing, preponderance of people, I should say, not knowing their representatives, not knowing their House of Rep members, not knowing their senator, their local government chairman. So they've been this mutual understanding, even though it was not codified anywhere or signed anywhere, really. And that's why for a very long time, you see that the tax to GDP ratio for Nigeria was hovering around 6% for a very long time. Now, because that understanding, quote unquote, was there to say, government, I won't bother you with whatever you are doing. You can administer all you want to administer for what I care. Just leave me alone. Don't bother me. Now, that was where we were coming from. Saying that will make us have appreciation of what we have now. Now, when this government then came into power, one of the first things they tried to do, if you recall, when this committee was set up, it was set up, they drew people from many places. They drew a partner from my firm. A lot of people were into it. There were stakeholder engagements, and all of that. Taiwo Oyedele himself, astute professional who had been on this side for a very long time, arduous believer in Nigeria that would work and all of that. So they put all of that together to say what needs to be done. So the first thing that this reform seeks to achieve really is harmonization. To say we have a lot of laws in silos. Now, yes, people may not like to read, but the fact that there's one provision here and there may be another contra provision in another place, was enough disincentive for anyone who truly wanted to even comply with these laws, to be interested. The previous president made an attempt through the Finance Act. But when you look at the application of those Finance Acts, you find out that you had Finance Act 2019, which became effective on the 13th of January 2020. Then in 2020, you had another Finance Act 2020. You had another Finance Act 2021. The challenge with those Finance Acts was that they were making cosmetics adjustments, amendment, as it were. So you had the Principal Act, let's say, for instance, the Companies Income Tax Act, that would have some existing provisions. A particular Finance Act would come, amend a few provisions such that whenever you are having transactions relating to that year, you would have to visit that particular Finance Act. You must first know that that provision had changed from the principal legislation, and then you would have to go to the Finance Act that related to that year, to be able to know what obtained to that transaction. Now, you have to be a professional earning income from taxation matter before you can dedicate that kind of time, towards getting it correct. So you had many laws. Taiwo had cited an example when he was talking in his video for the 5% surcharge. I was on CNBC last week, providing some enlightenment, on that subject matter to say, is this tax really new? Right? It's not new. It's been there, Section 14 of the FEMA Act, right? In fact, Section 14(1)(h), the provision is so clear that it even provides for the fact that 60% of the revenue collectible from that 5%, right, will be dedicated towards repair of federal roads, right? State roads, and then 40% will be dedicated towards repair of federal roads. So the provision was that pedantic. Unfortunately, the provision did not include who is the collector, who administers. Those were critical points or critical functions that should have been specified in the provision. Now, because there's also been a lot of tension around that subject matter, the subject matter of fuel in Nigeria, it kind of became convenient for previous administrations to just say, you know what, let's leave this thing. In fact, in the format of the PPPRA for pricing of petroleum, that amount was not there. So if it was not effective, it was not effected, the question is, does it automatically become redundant? We had it in the law. So those kind of things were the things that this reform primarily is seeking to achieve. Let's bring everything together into one legislation, such that when it comes to issue of revenue generation, issue of taxing, every Nigerian will know that this is the only law that I have to look at. The same thing obtains in the US, for instance, and all that. So that's the thrust, I should say, of the entire reform. Of course, you have the Nigerian Tax Act, you have the Nigerian Tax Administration Act, just to guide how, tax collection and all of that to be administered. You have the JTB, Joint Revenue Tax Board Act, and then you have the fourth one. I can't remember the name of that fourth one, at the moment. But there are four major reforms, that came through this window. Now, the reform then, of course, would have to expunge or repeal several existing laws. So all of the Value-Added Tax Act, all of the Stamp Duty Act, I think there are about 14 of them, of the laws that were repealed, right? And then made further amendments to about 12 other, or repealed 12 and then amended 14, other existing legislation. Now, those legislations that are not primarily revenue generating or tax related legislation, but whatever had some form of revenue generation, like this FEMA Act, for instance, all of those things were impacted. This particular section is then deleted, from the FEMA Act. So I try to provide the framework as to what the objective really is. Now, leaving that the area of the framework, the next question then is, how will this be administered? How do we suddenly then jump from a nation where there was some sort of mutual understanding? Because what typically used to happen is when you go to the informal sector, it was Pastor that alluded to something on this call earlier, that you have people that have shops, they don't have a lot, but it doesn't appear like they have a lot, but they have a lot of money, from a particular tribe. It's not only prevalent in one tribe, everybody does it. So we're coming from that area where, don't worry, whatever you do, as long as I'm not bothering you for services, don't bother me for the taxes. We then want to move to, this is what the law says, and then you have to do it. Expectedly, there will be tension. I think the government, in its wisdom, believes that they should then give sufficient timeline. Whether or not 6 months is sufficient enough is another kettle of fish altogether. But we have a law that is not immediately expected to be implemented. The laws were signed on the 26th of June, 2025. The bulk of them, I think 1 or 2 of them, are required to become effective on the 1st of January. Now, even in the Nigeria Tax Act, there are provisions like the FEMA, the surcharge provision, for instance, that had the entire section, which is Chapter 7, there's no time of commencement to it. So we have all of these emotions, from people who they want to tax everybody to death. They want to, we are not introducing, or the country is not introducing what is abnormal. It only appeared abnormal to our reality because we have lived in that situation for too long. If you go to more developed countries, nobody argues about taxes. Of course, incidences of or attempts to have tax evasion are also prevalent, in other nations, but they don't have tax to GDP ratio as low as what we currently have in Nigeria. So the government is just looking for how to block those loopholes, Then, because the trust quotient has been terribly low over the period, I kid you not, even if the government comes tomorrow and says, I'm going to give everybody, every Nigerian, I mean every Nigerian, 10 million naira each, some Nigerians will still doubt it. Even if the president makes that pronouncement himself, some Nigerians will doubt it. And I think that's why the government had tried to set up a committee, to say, let people look at this together, regardless of what the committee is saying. We would have to go through this phase, right? This phase where the government will have to reassure itself, reassure the citizen, see how what they said they would do and how it will be done. There are provisions that they don't even have specific timelines, ascribed to them, like the FEMA Act. It's the way it's coined is that, the surcharge, that came to replace the provision that you have in the FEMA Act. The way it's coined is that the minister, would at a particular date, determine a date in the future that this is going to become effective. In fact, it further says that the service, the FRS in this case, will be the collector or administrator, and then would also provide guidelines as to how it will work. So you have those kind of considerations. In terms of whether it will make people poorer, it will make people, it will create a lot of tension. I think it's just the reaction that people are not used to these things. And I'll give you examples. You have people who are earning income, let's say you're in paid employment, or you even have businesses of your own. Something as basic as rental income. Nigerians are not used to declaring rental income. Preponderance of Nigerians, when I make such statements, I didn't mean every Nigerian, right? I mean, for the most part, they're not used to saying, oh, I have an inheritance somewhere. I've earned 5 million from it, then I should declare that 5 million, for tax purposes. Interestingly, people have also thought that once you earn an income, there's going to be tax on it. And that's why I said reading or getting yourself familiar with what the provision said or what the provision expects, has been missing in our space. And I sincerely appreciate again the Africa Leadership Group, for creating this kind of platform, where different subject matter, you can have enlightenment sessions, like this, because it goes a long way in then restating the narrative and ensuring that you have that level of public enlightenment, because you can have revenue and not have taxes. Those are two different things. You can have revenue and you do not qualify for the threshold on which taxes, would apply, in which case you only have obligation to just file returns. The biggest challenge that Nigeria has suffered from is that the taxing population, the population of those that are genuinely paying tax or not, or paying anything at all, is quite insignificant compared to the entire population. So in terms of our number or the population, our population isn't quite an advantage for us when you look at tax revenue. Now, that is from a point of individual, even number of businesses. From time to time, agencies will reel out publications and say these companies are not paying taxes. Nigerians will say, I will shut down. If they ask me for tax, I will shut down the company. I will open another one. So this is just the news getting tighter. Will everyone become comfortable with it over the period? Maybe, maybe not. Would there be some pushback as we are currently experiencing now? Yes, it should have been anticipated. And that's why you would see that in the strategy of the presidency, the president had mentioned that I don't want a committee that will just put report together, toss it to me, and then move on. Their implementation strategy is to keep this fiscal and tax reform committee alive, and let that committee work together with the government, with respect to implementation. That is a different approach, completely different approach from what we've witnessed in the past. We've had, what was this, Confab, in 2014. We've had a lot of attempts at ensuring that there's a reset, but those attempts haven't quite been as successful as the government had wanted. We've had VADES, We've had VOAs, we've had a lot of initiatives in the past that you will wonder that this should be it, but for the first time, I feel a lot more citizens are beginning to say, okay, maybe this would advance us several steps closer to where we should be, so that we have a population of people that their income their lifestyle is reflecting their income level, and the income level is also matching with the tax paid. You see huge level of disproportionateness, right now. You see, it's one of the revenue agencies of one of the African countries that did something. Someone bought a vehicle, one of these high-end, very expensive vehicle, and they wrote the individual to say, we congratulate you on the acquisition of your Range Rover XX, something 2025 or 2026, whatever version or model it was, and they said, however, we realized that we looked at your tax income, level, and we realized that your income level does not support this. And then they've called the individual for questioning. Those are things that we don't get often in our space. Now, having said all of this, the balance for most people is that, why should I pay my taxes? Did we not say this thing is a social contract? If you go to my estate gate, I add my security. If you come to my compound, I sunk my borehole. If you go to the street on the road on my street, the landlord association and well-meaning people on my street contributed money to fix the road. So people continue to have those touch points where government participation it's not been proven that it's been adequate. And that is a major challenge that has held majority of Nigerians, back to ensure that they contribute their own quota. So it then tells you that you see why we have some sort of imbalance. Or when the administration started and you started seeing, we were mentioning austerity, and then you started seeing SUV, you saw that there was budget for a yacht, you saw that aircraft was changed, so people started feeling like, okay, it's like we're not in this thing together after all. So those are the extremes. I was just going through all of these so that we would appreciate how we've come a long way. We appreciate that we've come a long way, and would also appreciate how we got to this juncture. So what the government is trying to do with all of this in a nutshell is to say, I realize how low the trust quotient has been. But first and foremost, let's gather all of the pieces together. Let's produce one document that would codify all of the tax provisions, whatever they relate to, such that if you can reduce all of this, I like what has been done by SIO for Pastor Itua, by reducing it to a 2-pager. That's fantastic, because you have over 203 provisions, for instance, in the Nigeria Tax Act, But if you can reduce or collapse all of these things to just one legislation, that everyone can be bothered about that, and then we can at least start taking the right steps towards the right direction. So I've said a lot. I think I'm going to stop here, so that we can, like Pastor said, we can take some reactions that would also point us to additional directions that people want us to be specific on. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We've learned quite a lot, and I must salute your knowledge and your passion. So we're going to open the floor. And see if people have any questions, any reactions, and any suggestions or additions. And I'm going to ask Pastor Sonny to please moderate the question and answer session, and then we take it from there. Pastor Sonny, please.
Thank you very much, Pastor Ita. Good evening, Dejo. You're welcome.
Yes.
So I see a couple of hands are up, but just before I ask them, just some basic clarification. What is the tax rate right now? What I know is usually a range, but what is it?
For the individual?
Yes, for individuals.
Okay, so so what we have now is not a specific rate. What we've always had is the graduated scale.
Yeah.
So you have the first 800,000, taxed at, I think 11%, and then it graduates like that. And that's the clarification that Taiwo was trying to say, that the focus was not to increase the burden on everyone, except for those that are high income earner. Let me say this. The real intent, remember that I said there've been a lot of stakeholder engagement even when the committee was working. I remember Taiwo had been to our office, we've been a part of it and all of that a couple of times. The real intent was to harmonize the tax rates. What do I mean? Currently, before we get to 2026, currently, what subsists is if you have a particular type of income, for instance, let's say you have capital gains, right? You've sold something that you bought at X amount, let's say at 10 naira 10 years ago, and then you've sold it for 100 million today. You then have capital gains, which will be 100 million minus the historical cost of the asset. That gain will be taxed at 10%. Based on our law, as we currently have the law now, because it will be taxed under capital gains tax, capital gains tax act, and the act says it should be 10%. Meanwhile, if you have trading income, if you are a company owner, owner of a business, and you have trading income, that trading income will be taxed at 30%. So you see, income at both ends, but given the nature of the income, right, you have differing tax rates that would apply to it, right? And then when you then bring it to personal income tax, again, income of an individual, right? By the time you look at the effective tax rate of that, based on the old graduated scale, you may have maybe like 18%, 18 point something percent. Now, the real intent at the time the bill was on and all of that was to harmonize all of these rates to be about 25%. So the CIT rate should come down to 25%. There will be no need to go to CGT anymore because it will have fizzled out. It will just be income. If you have earned it as an individual, tax it, using the individual rate. If you have earned it as a company, tax it using the 25%, such that you have some sort of harmony in all of the rates. That was the real intent. But you know how much tension the governors and all of that parties brought into it, right? So the CIT rate couldn't come down, right, to 25%. It subsists at 30, But the VAT, they had attempted for the VAT to go up to 10%. That attempt also failed, so that created some sort of imbalance, So currently, you have that graduated scale subsisting, and it starts from 800,000, and it keeps going high up like that, such that by the time you end up to 50 million, your tax rates, some portion of your income would suffer tax at almost 25%. That's how I put it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. I can imagine what the ordinary man will do with this kind of answer you have given. I asked you a 15 seconds question. It took you almost 15 minutes to try to explain. I mean, I get it, but sometimes that's why a lot of people don't trust the system, because a simple question, what will my tax rate be? I want a range. Sometimes government people cannot really say, but there are a lot of hands up. Before I go to them, you had alluded to something that they may look at your lifestyle and say, "Oh, guy, you bought a Range Rover," and they will come for you. You bought this Range Rover for maybe 500 million. So far, the tax you have paid does not match. So is the government, can they do that now? Or has that law always been there? Because we hear that they will check people's BVN, they will check people's account, they will see the money flowing through your account. And if, the kind of tax you are paying does not match the 1 billion that has passed through your account, they will come for you. So we hear all stories. Please, can you clarify?
That law has always been there, but it has now been kind of made. It has been made kind of stronger, I should say. Section 17 of the Personal Income Tax Act mentioned artificial transaction, gave the tax authorities the power to be able to set aside whatever scheme or anything you've declared, right? And they do not agree with based on whatever information they had. But the question is, to what extent has this, been utilized? Nigeria is a country of many interests. When we had VADES in 2017, the promise was that if you didn't take advantage of it, you're going to go to jail. How many people went to jail by reason of tax evasion? How many people have gone to jail in Nigeria because they've not done the right thing? So those interests, would always come up. But as to whether your account will just be hijacked because an amount of money, like Taiwo mentioned in that video, that would be quite unconstitutional. And I do not see this government as one that will, given the tension and all of the challenges that people are going through right now, that would want to do that. So that's my specific answer to that.
All right, thank you very much. I will go to the platform, and usually what we'll do is we'll try to take like 3 questions. So if you can note them down, there are quite a lot of hands and there are quite a lot of people. Understandably, people want to know more about this. So if you can also keep your answers straight to the point so that we
Yeah.
can get it. And I will also request those that have comments or questions to try and make it very brief and short also so that we can take as many people as possible. All right, so thank you. I will start with Boluwaji Fanimo. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, hello, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yes, sir. My question is two. I want to know the harmonization measure that the government put in place between the Federal Inland Revenue Services and the State Inland Revenue Services on tax clearance, because there is a lot of kubasum. That is my first question. You see, the second question is that the request that they are making before one can get tax clearance is too kubasum, almost 15 contents or 14. I don't know if I want to pay 3 years tax clearance, they will be telling me to bring the TIN certificate, MIMAT, that's Memo and Article of Association, letterhead, NIN card, bank statement, CAC certificate, email, company address, ID card, TIN promas, land use charges, tenement rates, BVN, stamp duty, all these just to get tax clearance on a business that has not even seen the light of the day. Business that was just registered, that has not commenced, and because one need to operate under government purview, and you must go and pay the 3 years tax clearance of a business that has not come to existence, and with all these requests, please, is there any way
sir.
out? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Michael Odim, thank you very much. That's noted. Michael Odim, go ahead.
Thank you very much. The initiative is quite laudable to your team. And more importantly, to thanks Pastor Igodalo for this initiative as well. So real quick to the questions, I have a few of them. How do you converge the tax levies by both local government and area boys in some areas? That's one. Do you have a smart objective? Do you have a target that, apart from fixing roads, is there something we can, in terms of implementation of this new tax regime now, is there something would you want to put something out there to say, okay, in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, this is where we want to be? And I think that's should be part of your brand communication in getting people to believe. The last bet, one question, the pastor also raised the question of how do you trap the perceived small businesses into the tax net? They are perceived small, one shop or no shop, 3 persons in one shop, but then they are doing turnovers across different platforms, huge turnovers. How do you get them to be in the tax debt? And finally, how do you communicate more, especially to young people? You talked about belief, people believing in the system. And no thanks to the fact that there's been a strong discord between government and the governed. So how do you communicate more, especially to young people, even if it's people in primary, secondary school, and even universities? Because you also alluded to that fact I'll just cap this. You also alluded to that fact that our population has no help matters in terms of tax collection. But trust me, you also know that we have a lot of young people. So next 10 to 20 years, this population would become taxpayers. So how do you trap them into believing in what you are doing? Thanks again.
Thank you very much. We'll take one more question, then you can take those three. Boniface Chizia, and then after that, we take Sergius, Funke, and Henry. Sergius, welcome, sir. Sergius used to be my House of Rep member, and maybe you can tell me
say
what
your teacher. Okay,
no,
thank you
not my
very much.
teacher.
No, teacher, yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, you used to be my teacher at MBA level. You taught me, sir.
Okay, well, I don't know many of my students, so they're all over the place.
Yes.
So we're proud of you. My brother has some concern about this TIN and bank accounts. So I think that some people are feeling challenged about it. So Central Bank has gone out of its way to try and deepen the financial sector system and bring more people into banking, because monetary policies will not be effective. They are effective to the extent that you have more people within the banking system. Now, if you say you must have a task identification number before you open a bank account, and there's some concern all over the place, what that will do to people, people, POS operators who have bank accounts all over the place and so on. How are they going to get TIN? So I think there's some easy. I know they put some certain things. They say you can go online and try and get, but then that's for those who are up there. So often, most of us, when we got ours, we visited the tax office, to get our TIN. So I think it's a big challenge. I could go on, but I think that in terms of charity, I should stop here. I think that let's see. Thank you very much. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, so you will take those three, and then I'll come back to the other people on the platform. Go ahead, sir.
So these are three questions like 12, but let's quickly go through them. So I think someone's mic is up. Okay. So the first one is talking about harmonization between LRS and FRS. That's part of what the Joint Administration Tax Act, seeks to do. We've always had the JTB in existence. Part of what the JTB was supposed to do is to ensure that harmony is seamless, so that you do not have independent agencies at the federal level and at the state levels asking for different things, like we currently have it now. So we expect that harmony will be better in the future once we have this become effective. And then your request on tax clearance processing with respect to multiple layer, I think that speaks to the level of trust that we've had in the country. Taxpayers don't trust the tax administrators. Tax administrators don't trust the taxpayer. When you go for audit, for instance, you see how the conversation ensue. You see people having multiple financial statements and all of that. Those are all of the things that the tax authority also expect, and that's why you see that layer. Where we are able to improve the level of trust generally as a people, and it's not a day job, that's all of those things would definitely be streamlined. The next question says, how do you cover with respect to the levies? I think one of the things that I mentioned that this act had expunged or repealed, about 12 to 14 different acts. One of the acts that have been repealed is the Approved Taxes and Levy Act. That act was enacted to specify the taxes that are collectible, currently by state government, federal government, and the local government. That act has now been repealed. So whatever doesn't make its way into the current tax act that we have, which will become effective from January 2026, is not supposed to be paid. But like you said, you have the issue of area boys and all of that. We'll continue to still deal with that as a nation until everybody, gets their acts together to be sure that things are no longer business as usual. In terms of smart objective, I think the best way to measure something like this is to look at the tax to GDP ratio. I think there's a pursuit, if my memory serves me correctly, I think it's about 15% or so that the government is trying to pursue. If we are able to meet whatever the number that has been set is, that would be a good yardstick to know the extent of success that these reform, will have achieved in the future. One of the things that's also missing is most times when initiatives are put together like this, the objectives and the measurement, the measuring yardstick are usually not communicated. So it becomes a challenge for people or even the government in themselves to be able to measure themselves whether they've fed well or not. Whether that is deliberate strategy or not, I cannot tell. In terms of perceived small businesses into the tax net, I think part of the tool that they've used now is not just to use the revenue threshold. So if you look at revenue, you can say, oh, I'm not making up to this revenue, but there is also, it's conjunctive. The rule is not conjunctive. You must have a revenue of 50 million and your asset value, your assets must not be more than 250 million. So disguising through revenue will no longer just be the case, and it's conjunctive. It's not either or. So once you are carrying asset that is huge, you have a trailer, but you are saying your revenue is just 49.9 million, but you have a truck or you have 10 trucks that are valued at 1 billion, then you are not a small business. So I think that's a smart way that this government had used to put that together. So the next question says, how do you communicate to the young people? I think it stems from events like this, programs like this, each one reaching one, preaching it, saying the story. Everybody cannot run away from the country. Everybody cannot japa, as they used to say. But at some point, if we start doing things rightly, sooner than later, it's not going to happen overnight. I must indeed say that. Nobody expects it will indeed be a miracle if we all slept this night and we woke up tomorrow morning and Nigeria has been completely fixed, but we must not shy away from events like this. Then the final question here, which is the last one, says TIN and bank accounts, concerns around it. Interestingly, some of those rules are already operational even right now. There are certain things you want to do now. If you don't provide your payer ID or any of that, the bank will not reckon with you, But of course, some banks, because they were not codified, some banks based on interest. Remember what I said, Nigeria is a country of interest, has many interests, So based on interest, might have overlooked one or two things that CBN had said because there are really no tax code preventing them. So I think what the government is trying to do now is to then codify some of these things, so that it becomes express violation of the law if someone runs an account. The pandemonium of the experience we are going to have will not be too different from what we had when people were mandated to have BVN, for instance. If you recall, despite the timeline given up to today, some Nigerians that are bankable still do not have BVN, and it will surprise you to think that that is the case. So I presume that we would have to entertain as much time, for all of us to fall in line eventually, and then continue to have a better environment. So I'm going to stop here for those responses so that we take the next set of questions.
Thank you very much for keeping your responses brief. We have Sergius Ogun, and after that, Funke Awolowo. After that, we have Henry Kent. I'll take those three, then I'll come to Prince Justice MK Ahmad. So, Honorable Sergius.
Good evening, sir.
You want to tell us about
thank you for the opportunity. I think he has partly answered part of my question, which is we want to pay tax. We are patriots. We want our country to be like any country in the Western world. But the situation where we pay our tax and those in authority squander the money. The president bought a presidential jet that was not appropriated for. I was a candidate of the ADC in the last senatorial election in my state, Edo State. Top government officials flew in private jets, stayed in hotel till the election was over. This is just a by-election. And the eventual winner is going to spend less than 18 months in office. That's wasting taxpayers' money. So why would I be enthusiastic? Why would I want to pay tax if we are going to pay the tax and those in government will squander the money? Now, Section 14(2)(b) of the 1999 Constitution as amended says, security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. But you mentioned a while ago how people are paying for transformer, paying for security. In that act, nobody should pay for security. And the welfare we are referring to, or the Constitution refers to, is the well-being of the people. But this does not exist. So how can we trust the government with more money? That's one. And secondly, I am more of a farmer these days. So you go to your farm, you bring out your farm produce. There's not a lot of money in government, in farm or in farming. And then you have this produce, they call them produce, what do you call them? The people that work for the local government that collect tax for produce. For every checkpoint in more than, depends on how many local governments you will cross, you will pay these people. But as a farmer, you have already paid your tax. The ones these guys are collecting, where do you place that? So I think there's a whole lot of rejigging that is not enough to just copy and paste whatever is happening in the Western world. We have a unique system here that I think the government needs to give attention to. I have more questions, but I know there are so many hands up. Let me allow them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Oga Sajos. Pastor Funke Olo, thank you very much for keeping it brief, and we'll take as many hands as are up. Go ahead, Pastor Funke.
Good evening. Thank you so much for that explanation. And I want to say well done for, taking another look at tax, because Lagos, especially Lagos, we know of the OBJ and Bola Tinubu saga, and we know that it was actually taxation that saved the day. And so, it's not, we're not surprised that it's looking at that. I remember living in the UK, even income support, the things that they use for social upliftment are taxed. Every time you get your income support, you can see tax. So tax is a reality. And, if we read the Bible, I think Matthew, one of the apostles, was a tax collector. So it's the reality of the day. So I think we are not pulling up, we should be really, really more advanced when it comes to taxation. But, we are not going to continually rant. But I want a situation whereby taxation, is part of the reality, so that even the poor, the rich, they're taxed. There's proportional taxation, there's compulsory taxation. If you go to the US, with every purchase, they show you the tax you need to pay. What are the realities that you are infusing, so that everyone is aware and you don't have people ranting and questioning? Because at the end of the day, when people want to demonstrate against the government, they say they are paying tax and so they should be heard. So what are you doing to infuse this reality and to make it common among the people? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will go to Henry Kent for the last in this segment. Henry Kent, thank you very much, ma. Please be brief, keep it short so that we can take as many questions. Henry, unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Pastor Ighodalo, and thank you, Mr. Dejo, for the enlightenment. Well, some of us stay in the Western world. I'm presently in Toronto, and the last speaker asked about trying to copy the Western world. I don't think Nigeria is trying to copy the Western world, because in the Western world, taxes are for redistribution of wealth. It's not just for revenue. So the Nigerian government, with their inadequacies, they just want state is going to collect, federal government will collect, local government, area boy. Nigeria is just overregulated. It's unimaginable. You have in the Western society, those that are not even paying taxes are living better, because when you are working, you're going to work yourself out, and government is going to collect most of. But even when you are not even paying taxes, you can have free council flats. You get tax credit. So taxes should be to measure your standard of living. If you have, you give. If you don't have, the government and those that are able will support you. So I don't even understand how government will come up with individuals to have a TIN number. What are you guys doing? Look at how taxes are run in Europe. Look at how it is run in North America. Everybody you have to have your social insurance number. That one is key. It is from the social insurance number that the government measures your standard of living. If government needs to help you, government gives you tax credit. And if you have to help the government because you're a business owner. You pay your taxes. And by the way, most of the taxes collected are lower level taxes from the state and the local government. Income tax. No, but businesses are not paying. They are not paying taxes all over the world. Bill Gates and Elon Musk, they don't pay taxes. Donald Trump, they don't pay taxes. It is people working under them that pay these taxes, income, state and local government. And that was why somebody was asking, how do you harmonize the state taxes and the federal government taxes together? Because that is where the people are, the state and the local government. Those are where the incomes are coming from, income taxes.
All right, sir.
You guys should just put down this thing for individuals. It's madness. It doesn't make sense.
All right, sir. Thank you very much for your question. Okay, you can take those three, and then I will go to another three. Some are comments, so just save the comment and answer the questions.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I think those were very passionate questions, and I'm going to start from the very first one from Honorable Goons. We want to pay the taxes, genuine concern, we want to pay the taxes, but we look at what the taxes are used for, and we would have to have a change of mind. You had mentioned some sections in the provision in the Constitution, alluding to the fact that it should be for security and all that. The truth is that anywhere in the world, right, if you say one party is wrong and you also want to be in the wrong, that makes two of us. That's the reality. I'm a Nigerian and everybody feels the heat. But if ever the dream of having a better Nigeria will become a reality at some point, I think one party would have to start it. One party would have to demand it, and one party would have to be right, at least for one. Now, the truth is, nobody wants to pay taxes. Even in the developed nation, when you speak to people that live there, I mean, we've heard from Mr. Kent, and all of that, but the fact that you have something to get, as direct benefits kind of encourages you to want to pay. So I agree with you in terms of the multiple levies. I'd mentioned that particular law, stratifying the different levies that are collectible by different layers of the government has been repealed. So some of the taxes, again, have also been harmonized into development levy for 4%, for instance. So all of the multiple NASENI, police trust fund, all of those things have now been consolidated to have only one thing. So quite some attempts, I would say, to make things uniform and to make things make sense. Are those attempts sufficient, given where we are coming from? Of course not. But are they reasonable enough to get us started? I strongly believe so. Then the second question here from Pastor Funke says that tax should be a part of our reality. Exactly what we are saying. There's been this prolonged disconnect. People are disconnected. If you talk to a vulcanizer on the streets, you talk to someone selling oranges, someone doing that, disconnect is so huge, is huge. And so is the level of the responsibility of the government towards the citizen. So when you talk about the disconnect, some people will say, rightly so, I don't feel the presence of the government in my area. So if you talk to some people in Nigeria, for instance, they will tell you they've not had power in 2 months. Who lives in any part of any world? How can you imagine not having public power for 2 months? So those concerns are real. They are not just common agitations by people, but if ever things are going to start working, we have to start from the grassroots. And that's why this provision says, if you earn less than 800,000, is it enough? Maybe not. In a year, don't bother about taxes. Because you are already disadvantaged, quote unquote. So just leave the taxes. Just enjoy your income and let the rest of the people pick it up from there. Before now, we had it as low as, I think it was 300,000. You will be required to pay 1%, but now, so don't pay anything, it's at 0%. So increased level of consideration, I would say, to ensure that taxes become more and more part of our reality. That would be my response.
Just a bit of clarification there, Adeyemi. You earn less than 800,000. Is it household or single individual?
Individual.
So,
If you earn less than 800,000 in a year, your tax rate will be 0%.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I think the last comment from Mr. Henry Keynes, it was more of a concern and was generic to say that yes, taxes in developed countries should be for redistribution of wealth. In fact, in some nations, taxes are used as tools to control behavior. So if you look at the report, for instance, and you find out that you had a lot of people diabetic for a particular year, they look at it and say, what do? We introduce sugar tax. By the time you do that, you see people running away from items, that have a lot of sugar component in them, and then they take more of water and all of that. And then by the time you see the report again of hospital lodgement and all that for the following year, you find out that there's been some correction towards where the government expected to be. So have we gotten to that point yet in Nigeria where we are struggling with compliance? Maybe not. But are we on that pathway with what has been done? Is it perfect? Not perfect. Is it sufficient enough to get us started? I strongly believe so. And on a final note, on the basis of individual should have taxpayer identification number. I think because we generally do not, we have many data points in Nigeria. You have the NIN, you have the BVN, when you mention the social security number, everybody can attest to that. That is what identifies you. And that's why you also see the issue of crime. Earlier this morning, someone chatted me and said, I need your help. Is someone I know? I said, I need your help. Can you assist me with something? And just yesterday, someone had raised an alarm that our WhatsApp had been hacked. If I didn't know, I would probably have fallen for that, and then the person sent someone's bank account number for me to pay the money into because I played along. The question is, what if the government is able to stop that person from operating an account temporarily until some regularizations are done? So you see that there are some merit in some of these things. Maybe the approach is not entirely the best, but some merits, are definitely there. You cannot, not a tax identification number per se, if all you have is the payer ID, something that just shows that you have been recognized for tax purposes, but having to continue to live life and income, enjoy part of the insufficient benefit that government has continued to give, and then you pay nothing year in, year out. I think if I take a leaf from what Pastor Funke said, that reality should be gone, given where we've gotten to. So I'll stop there so that we can take the next level of questions.
Thank you very much. We will take Prince Justice, then MK Ahmad, and then Charles Obi. And then maybe we'll take Professor Nike and Omotayo Morgan, just 5, and we'll take it all together, and probably that will be the end of it. So thank you very much. Let's go ahead with the first person. Please be brief so that we can take everybody.
Okay, good evening. My question is, why do we continue to create new tax law? Why the existing revenue is not properly managed? That is my question. We keep creating new tax law. The previous one has not been properly managed. Why?
All right, thank you. Very sharp. I hope everybody will ask this kind of question. MK Ahmed, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Sonny, and thank you very much, Adeyemi and Pastor, for the opportunity. I think this is an excellent opportunity, and I want to commend you for that. I would also want to believe that the representatives of ZAC and Tayo's team, Presidential Committee, are also part of these discussions. And I'm taking a high-level approach, not the detailed tax laws. How are we building ownership? And the second issue, what strategy do we have? Not just in terms of building ownership across the different segments of our society, but also even explaining so that it's not just a compliance issue, but it's a culture. And I'm making this statement because those of us who are old, I'm over 70 now, are aware that as basic as bicycle license, in the 60s and 70s and even early 90s, the ordinary man is very, very conscious and he wants to pay his bicycle license because he knows the consequences. Now we've moved from that culture. How do we reverse that? Basically, so I hope and pray we could have perhaps a more detailed response, either from Adeyemi or any of the teams, just to also know the role Tayo's presidential committee is also playing in terms of the implementation or supervision of the implementation. Thank you, Sonny, and thank you for the opportunity. And also to let you know, sorry, I'm not taking a lot of your time, that this is for the privileged and somehow relatively educated people. Our pastor would also come up with strategy to look at what about those of us who may not be in a position to understand and appreciate some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Charles Obi, unmute yourself. We can't see you anymore, but I hope they will allow you to unmute. Charles? Okay. Maybe you have gone out.
Okay, can I go now?
Huh?
Yeah.
Who is that?
I'm trying to see. Yeah.
You are not very audible.
Hello.
I'm sorry.
Hi.
Okay.
My head. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay.
No, we can't hear you.
Oh.
Uh-oh. We're very sorry. Maybe you just type your question in so that we can take it. Is Professor Nike there? Oh. Huh?
Very well.
Professor Nike has also
Yes, I'm here. I am here. I am here.
Okay,
Can you
Prof,
hear me?
go ahead,
Okay,
please.
thank you. Thank
If
you,
that's
Mr.
Charles, just hold on or just put your question in the chat box.
Thank
Your
you.
audio is very bad. Yeah. Prof, go ahead, man.
Thank you, Pastor Sonny, and thank you, Mr. Oladejo. Tax issues are always so confusing. It doesn't matter how often you explain them. So you need to explain them more often than you do. It seems to me that the tax issue is applying only to some people and not to others, because some people have been have been made to bypass taxes by not giving them proper salaries, but increasing allowances. The allowances of legislators and the leaders in government, etc. This is what is making them much richer than all of us, because the allowances are not taxed, or are they taxed? If you look at the total emoluments of these people, it goes far beyond what is allowed anywhere else in the world. So please explain to me why we should continue with that kind of pattern. That's number one. Number two is that retired people normally do not have extra income, but some do. How can you, get to those who do and make the taxation fair on whatever else they're doing? I'm saying this because, again, some people who are supposed to have been retired as governors become legislators or become something else in government, and they are being paid, they're earning salaries there, as well as their pensions from the previous, the previous public services. And that just, again, bloats their salaries or emoluments. Number three is that there used to be an education tax, which is taken from all of us who earn a salary from government. What has happened to the education tax? Is it gone completely? And is it not possible to dedicate part of the taxes that government gets to education and to health? A certain amount to education and to health, so that they can meet with their obligations in those two areas, and probably in other areas as well. Finally, how can we become better informed about all these changes? It's all right. You said that, you are all
Okay.
on.
All right, Prof.
Yes. So how can we be better informed? By people
Thank you.
like you, not just online. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, Charles, you are back. Can you unmute now and see if we can
Yes,
hear
I
you?
am. Thank you.
Okay,
It was a
thank you.
conspiracy.
Yes, I know. We didn't want you to ask your question.
And thank you, Honorable Anderson, for your articulation of the issues. You did talk about the fact that taxes are for a purpose. And what we see in our country is that whenever these type of conversations are being had, the example that is pointed before us is Lagos. Lagos and Lagos State. That's where we see some results. Notice I said some results. We don't see results of tax collection across the nation. When this government came into power, they talked about a 1.1 trillion naira revenue that was going to be generated within, I think it was within 9 months, 12 months. Now we have also heard that they met their target revenue generation within 5 months ahead of schedule. But yet we don't know the details of what that looks like. And so it would be helpful if you can share with us what those details are and how the rest of the nation, apart from Lagos, how are we benefiting from the tax collection that is taking place in our country? Thank you.
All right, great. So we'll take the last hand up, which is Omotayo, and Jumoke Akintaylor will read out some of the questions in the chat room. Omotayo Morgan would go ahead. Thank you. Okay, we can hear you, Omotayo. All right, Dejo, you may want to answer those questions that have been asked, and after that, if we still have time, we'll just read a few questions from the chat box. Go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. Again, you have multiple barrel questions here, but let's take them one after the other. So you have, why do we create new tax laws when the old ones or the existing ones have not been properly managed? I mentioned that part of the challenge that the government saw in the current taxing system is you have a lot of disjointed parts. And a classical example was when I mentioned the issue of 5% on fuel purchase, that now became a surcharge in the Chapter 7 of the Nigeria Tax Act. So to avoid that kind of redundancy, I should say, the government decided to say, let's not make cosmetic changes. Let us do holistic reform. Yes, we recognize we have not fully utilized all of the provisions that we've had. Some of them have become redundant. So let us set them aside completely as much as possible and have a new one. I hope that answers your question. Then MK Ahmed had mentioned that how are we building ownership? I think, quite frankly, building ownership isn't going to be a day's job. I'd mentioned that the approach that government is taking now is that the committee is not just going to be your regular committee. There was a time in Nigeria that people alluded to the fact that if you didn't want anything to be done, just set up a committee and hand the responsibilities over to the committee. So for the first time, I think government is trying to do something differently by introducing a different implementation approach to say that this committee haven't concluded, quote unquote, the work of drafting the laws. You are not going to just toss them to us and then make them struggle with them, in terms of implementation. We are also going to work together to ensure that we implement together. So I think for me personally, that introduces a different mix, and one would only hope to see the effectiveness of that implementation strategy, in terms of how will it improve the experience that we have always had in the past. How do we revive consciousness? You mentioned like the issue of vehicle owners wanting to ensure that you come correct and you stay on the side of the law in the time of the 70s. you know, I'd mentioned something. I said I didn't want to say the proverb. If you continue to hit a particular high over and over and over and over and over, you know, my people from Yoruba land will say, if the eye is not blind, it will continue to look in a funny way. That's what has happened to us. So over the years, people have become very used to non-compliance without any consequence whatsoever. You know, whether you pay or you don't pay, this arrangement that you don't bother me, I don't bother you, has subsisted. You know, so if anything is going to change, it would have to be gradual. People had mentioned on this call where you have you are saying we don't have money, the connection is bleeding, and then you are buying, you know, the president's carrier, you know, was changed and all of that. Yes, there were justifications for it, but some people believe that was extra budgetary spending, and also the timing didn't justify the kind of move. So you've had those kind of actions that were kind of contradictory, you know, and those things would further militate against the trust that people are beginning to build in the government. Uneducated people, how do we reach them? At some point in Anderson, we converted the personal income tax that we currently have into multiple languages. I'm hoping that that kind of project will be undertaken, you know, even now. By the time you have those things, the principal act, you know, become effective. Some people have also taken it upon themselves to start doing certain things. For instance, when this implementation started, I looked at it that we've not had this kind of holistic review, you know, done in recent times. I started a podcast. You know, that's my own personal way of ensuring that at least you have an environment of people, business owners that are educated. Will that reach everybody? Of course not, but it will reach some community of people, you know. And this program, for instance, that is being put together weekly, you know, by and by, it's expected that that population of uneducated people should continue to shrink. But efforts would have to continue from all fora to ensure that you have improvement in that regard. Prof had mentioned that tax issues apply only to some people. Why is it that it applies only to some people and not some people? You know, they are the drafters of the law. And that's why a typical Nigerian can say whatever they are saying their own, because there's this general maxim that who comes to equity must come with clean hands. If you have a disproportionate part of what comes to you as allowances, and those allowances are not suffering taxes because they have been tagged for specific purposes, whether or not they are being used for those purposes is a separate conversation altogether. And by so reason, those things are not going to become subject of taxes. Those kind of treatments, you know, introduce some form of inequality, I should say, you know, and I think the government is trying to say one thing and defend the thing, you know, regardless of how people feel or what people feel, you know, about it. Redefined people normally do not have extra income. I think this comment from Prof was just generally saying that, how do you ensure that people that have more, you know, are the ones that pay more? A classical example I'm going to cite is with respect to rental income, where what you used to have in the personal income tax act before, consolidated relief allowance, has now been changed to rent relief. The way the provision is crafted is such that the individual who wants to claim the rent relief would have to provide the details of his landlord and all of that. So, for instance, imagine that you have the tax authorities now having details of everyone who has paid money to a particular house owner or home owner, you know, during the year, and that will then give credit to the fact that, oh, you earn that particular income. So I think those provisions are kind of specific in a way to say we don't want to tax this, we want to tax this. But of course, having the law is one part of it. Having to implement it, notwithstanding what the interests are like, is another part. And you asked the specific questions in terms of education tax is gone. Yes, correct. It has now been replaced with what we have as development levy, you know, which is 4%. So not just education tax, all of the other NASENI, you know, the different type of taxes that we used to have in that regard have all been collapsed into that. Is it possible to have dedicated tax a dedicated part of the taxes to be towards certain areas. Yes, it's possible. It's been done in the past. For instance, this new law also has what we used to call pioneer status incentive, scrapped to be replaced with what we call priority sector. So there are sectors that will be favored, based on the realities and where the government wants investment to be channeled into. Those sectors would have a certain percentage in terms of credits. There was also a time where government had said, I think it was infrastructure, RITC, road credits, where you can decide which area you want your tax, to be administered to, as an entity. But we hope that some of the new initiatives that have been developed now, that have been put together in the bill, in the act now, would assist in showing that dedicatedness. On a final note from the Prof, I think, how can we become better informed? I think the best way to be better informed is to continue to be a part of initiative like this, continue to keep ourselves abreast of what is going on online. I'd mentioned personally that my own way of saying this is big and everybody has to know what this is about is for me to have started a podcast, so, and that's something I struggled with, because you wonder, how do you keep up on a weekly basis, and then you have to do a video, and then post it explaining one provision or one part of the law, so in our own little way, everyone can just add to that effort, to be sure that you have a community of people who are educated. The final question from Charles, I think we have about 3 questions here saying that tax is for a purpose, but what we see is only Lagos. Now, Lagos has been the epicenter, really, because there've been some undue concentration, or maybe due concentration. And if you understand the history of the country, at some point it was the capital of the nation. So maybe because of the focus that has been around it, it's been the nerve center, for a very long time. So it's easier to, and then when you also look at revenue contribution, tax revenue contribution, for instance, by subnationals, you will see that because you have most of the companies HQ'd, in Lagos, you see that there is a lot. In fact, it's quite disproportionate when you look at what is coming from maybe just three major states. When you look at Lagos, you look at Rivers State, and I can't remember correctly now which other states. So having the emphasis on Lagos is not surprising. What is surprising rather is the level of organization that you've then had, the little that we can see, at least in Lagos. We should have been able to replicate those things across board, so that when I go to Nasarawa, tax ID, or payer ID will not be strange, or tax clearance certificate will not be a phenomenon that we have to start explaining, but what you currently see now is what you see now. The Joint Revenue Tax Act, the Joint Revenue Tax Act that we currently have has some provisions that should force some alignments to happen, but whether or not those provisions will then be adhered to is another consideration. But we hope that those things would happen. There is the last question here says, how do other parts of the nation benefit? I think I'd mentioned that by ensuring that, yes, a particular state can trail the blaze, but we have to find a way to ensure other states also follow suit, so that you have all of the subnationals pointing into the same direction and you have a nation that works. So let me stop here so that I think Jumoke is ready for us. Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you for making yourself available to address all these questions. And I just also want to clarify that Mr. Adeyemi is not with the government. He's a deputy associate with Anderson, and he's just helping us out by addressing this question. So thank you. We have 2 more hands up, and that's the very last that we're going to take. We were trying to take Mr. Motayo, but he wasn't able to mute at that time. So we're going to take Mr. Motayo and Pat's iPhone, and then I'll read some questions from the chat, if you can take them all together. So please go ahead, Mr. Motayo. We've asked you to unmute. Mr. Morgan, Omotayo Morgan, I'm sorry, if you can't unmute, I'll go to the next person. Pat's iPhone, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Pat's iPhone is Pat Utomi.
Oh, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening. I am good. Thank you. Very good effort here. But a number of things I thought are important to point out. Taxation is very important because it gives us leverage to hold people accountable. The whole history of taxes and the Boston Tea Party, where you talk about taxation and representation, is because when you pay your taxes, you can hold government accountable. Unfortunately, our system hasn't quite allowed that. I listened to the explanation of buying aircraft and when people are supposed to tighten belt. The reason is because we don't have a legislature. What we have is a situation where power can just get everybody to bend towards where it wants, and representation doesn't help. So that's a problem with taxes, because central to paying the tax is holding who gets the tax accountable for using the money in a particular way. Now, examples were given from the 60s when, bicycle tax, any tax, people were running and all of that. Oil ruined that in Nigeria. The government could get money straight from oil and didn't care whether you paid taxes. So we have to rebuild a tradition of paying taxes. But in doing that, when we've had a long trust deficit, I think there's a particular use for specific use taxes. I mean, in the United States, for example, gasoline tax is for road highway maintenance. Highway maintenance. So in our country, if we had specific use taxes, then stakeholders around that specific use should be able to have a citizen committee that monitors. For example, if gasoline taxes or petrol, as we say in Nigeria, go to highway maintenance in Nigeria, then Nigerian Society of Engineers, the road transport workers, whatever, can form a monitoring committee that will get the exact amount of money that was raised for highway maintenance, monitor how government deploys that money in highway maintenance, and then people will have more trust and can pay taxes. So simplifying, harmonizing is a good thing, but there's still a high trust deficit at this point because government has not used public resources as responsibly as we think it should. So putting in place monitoring, civil society-based monitoring, or renewing legislatures to represent the people and not just themselves will make a great difference. But taxes are important, very important, particularly because they help citizens hold government accountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I see you've just introduced another initiative, so thank you for that. So Mr. Omotayo Morgan has unmuted, so that would be the last hand we'll take, and I'll just add a couple of more questions from the chat room, and you can take them all together. Omotayo Morgan, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to ask, when this new tax law takes effect and people are brought in, are they going to look at what their tax record has been before this new tax law with a view to penalizing them or not? That's my question.
Thank you so much for keeping it short. So a couple of questions from the chat room. Who do I pay my income tax to? Lagos IRS or FIRS? That's question number one. And question number two, is the new Tax Reform Act taking over the responsibility of the Nigerian Customs Service? Then the third question, I believe you already spoke to it, which is the harmonization between federal tax and state tax. So those are the three questions from the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Jumoke, and thank you, Monku Pat, for your remarks. I think it couldn't have been better put in terms of what the fact that our system has failed in terms of accountability, and that is with all. I mean, that is as it affects all areas and all strata, I should say, whether it is accountability from the people, to the government, or from the government even to the people. And you did mention that the oil revenue, the outbreak of the oil revenue kind of created, that shift, and rightly so. Yes, specific use tax, would help. I guess that is what that chapter 7 with respect to surcharge is trying to now enshrine properly so that it would be followed. But the way Nigerians can be very emotional with respect to fuel. The issue of fuel in 2012, I remember very vividly, brought the entire nation, to a standstill for weeks. So I think government is going to be very careful with that. And I think the root cause of this, the bane of the issue really is with respect to trusts. Trust lies at the core of the issue bordering on social contract. If you, even in a marital situation, if your spouse isn't going to have problem giving you all of his or her income if he trusts you absolutely, because he knows that if anything comes up, you are going to find a way to ensure it is sorted. But under the situation where we are, where people can be left alone, people can literally die from inability to be able to access medical care for something as low as 20,000 naira. Under that situation, you want to check it again to say, do I really want to trust this government? But that has to change at some point. So I agree with you 100%. High trust deficit is the bane of the issue, and we have to start fixing that somehow. Madam Morgan had mentioned that when this takes effect, are we going to use the rear mirror to drive? Someone said if you use the rear mirror to drive, you will definitely crash. Are there provisions that are going to be implemented retrospectively? Not quite, because part of the focal point of taxation or canon of taxation is the fact that it has to be precise, right? And it has to be fair. So if something had happened under a particular taxing regime, and the laws relating to the penal charges or the penalties that have been ascribed by those provisions were not enforced, to what extent can the government then take a particular taxing regime and seek to apply it in the past? Yes, to the extent that those things are encoded in the law, that would happen, but it does not mean that because the regime is changing, then everybody who had violated the tax laws will go scot-free. That window was given, and it was called amnesty in 2017. I remember very vividly. That was the Vase regime to say all your sins are forgiven. What is happening doesn't mean the rules that subsisted at the time the offense was committed, would not be enforced. So just to clarify that this is not bringing current sledgehammer to come and hit on people's head, in a way that it will be weightier. Who do I pay to? LRS and FRS. That's pretty straightforward. That depends on where you live. Tax Nigeria is about residency and who you are. If you are an individual, you have obligation to your state's Inland Revenue Service as they are currently constituted in the state where you live. If you're a company, then your obligation for income tax purposes would still remain with the Federal Inland Revenue Service, with the exception of certain people, armed forces, and some, if you live in Abuja, you have Abuja, FCC, IRS, and all of that. So there are a few exceptions, but generally, who you pay to or who administers your taxes will be a function of first your form of incorporation, or what kind of entity are you? Are you an individual or are you a company? Is the reform taking over with respect to custom? That was the point that was quite that raised a bit of tension, because part of what the government wanted to do, with this is to ensure that revenue-related matter, you had something going on where almost every RAMFAC, every agency, was collecting money somehow and was saying this is going to be that. So they've tried to streamline all of those things to a particular agency to administer as long as it relates to taxes. But of course, issues that still border on the obligations that have been precisely given or allocated by the taxing legislation, for Custom Act, would definitely, remain. So the reform is not coming to take over everything that Custom is doing. Customs will still continue to remain at the border, and that is not the intention at all. Then I think the last one here says federal. I can't see my handwriting, maybe because it was the last question. I can't see what I scribbled in here. Federal. I think I was trying to say federal or state or something like that, but I can't recollect. What that relates to. Jumoke, if you can help me, if you still have the question, and otherwise.
Is it the
last one?
harmonization?
Yes, the very last one
between the federal and the state taxes? That was the last question.
Okay,
what is the harmonization in place for the state and federal?
Okay, fantastic. So what has happened is the fact that all the multiple layered taxes that you've had, if you are familiar with the Approved Taxes and Levies Act, you will know that we had quite a number of them. You had radio, television levy, you had radio levy, you had all manners of levies. All of those things have now been abolished to say that only the taxes that have been specified in the Nigeria Tax Act are collectible, by the states. You also have some of the taxes, or levies, I should say, that you have from some non-state actors and all that. Now, the question is, will these things disappear overnight? You are familiar with Nigeria as much as I am. If you want to commute from a particular state to the other, and you are carrying goods or you are carrying stuff, you will see several people that will stop you, we ask you for haulage and all of that. Can the passage of a single law, as we currently have it, suddenly make all of those things and all of those institutionalized or all of those state actors disappear? I guess your guess is as good as mine. But will it happen in the final analysis? I want to believe so. That if we continue with this tempo and we continue to have the level of seriousness that we've had shown in the past 2 years, matched with sincerity of purpose on the part of the government, I want to believe anything can be achieved.
Thank you so very much. That brings us to the end of this session. Your questions, I think we're going to issue a press release on this because it does really give a lot of information to the new tax reform and answers a lot of questions. So we thank you for your time this evening. I'm just going to take a couple of announcements. And for those of you joining us for the first time, we meet here every Thursday at 5 p.m. And Mr. President had opened up with what we are about and what we're trying to do on this platform. So I had put a link in the chat room inviting you to come on board and join us. This has been going on for 5 years. We celebrated 5 years, I believe, in May of having these weekly conversations, town hall meetings. And those of you that have been here, you know that we've learned a lot from just the people that come here with information. Relationships have been built. We've been more informed about selecting the right leaders and also our engagement and participation in nation building. So we invite you to just join us every Thursday. Join us, get on board. We have a lot of initiatives. I'm just going to run through them as I usually do every Thursday. So we have the School of Leadership and Governance, and what we do there is we have the Citizens Responsibility course, and we take citizens through like 6 weeks of training, the laws, constitution, knowing your rights, how to be engaged. So we've graduated over 100 and something people from that. One that is really exciting for us now is the youth training, development training for local government positions. That's coming up at the end of the year, where we want to be able to train youths to engage in local government politics. prepare them for office? How do we support them with the training, with the skill sets that they need to be successful, to be responsible, ethical, and accountable leaders at that local government level? So we invite you to please join us on that as well. All our initiatives, I mean, of course, you guys know we don't charge for it, but we've had quite a lot of sponsors that believe in the vision of this organization. And we want to thank all of you that have been sponsoring different initiatives. But we're also asking you to come on board, join us. If there's an initiative that you're interested in supporting, let us know and we'll give you that information. We also publish our accounts every year. I'm actually, myself and Pastor Olu are in charge of that. So we're very transparent. Our books are open for you to see. Every penny we spend is accounted for. We have audited accounts. So the reason we ask you to join us on this is because nation building is everyone's responsibility. We have to do this work. No one is going to do it for us. In a country of 220 something million, we can't continue to let a few hold us hostage. So we invite you to please join on board, engage with Africa Empowerment Foundation, ALG. We also have the IOI mentorship program, which is the Itwa Olajide Godalo mentorship program. And that is really replicating our president, the values that he stands for. How do we instill that in the up and coming to make sure that they continue to build on responsible, ethical, and accountable leadership? So ask questions, get on board, join us. And the last but not the least is the campaign we just started. Those of you that have been here, we had the past few weeks was about citizens' call to action. Everyone saying, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to do, but how do we do it? And so the campaign of Do the Right Thing, we just started that. And thank you to those that volunteered that can help prepare kids and infomercial on how we really take this to the grassroots of doing the right thing, obeying the laws, and voting for the one that represents the interest of the of the community, not selling your vote to those that you know do not have the interest of the country at heart. So that's part of the campaign that is coming up. Again, I will put our information in the chat room, and there's a link for you to fill. We'll definitely contact you. So we thank you again for joining us this evening. Always good to have everyone and to see our numbers grow. Invite your friends, share the flyer with your contact. Even if you don't get the flyer, it's the same Zoom link, same time, 5 p.m. It's just a different topic. So good to have you here. See you again next week, Thursday. And on behalf of the leadership of the organization, I want to thank you for joining us. Our president had to step away for another engagement. So thank you. Have a very good evening, Mr. Adeyemi. Again, thank you for joining us on such short notice and for the information that you provided. It was very, very insightful. We are grateful for your time here. And we hope to see all of you again next week, Thursday. Have a good evening and God bless you. Thank you. Yes, great session. Yes, it was indeed a great session. Thank you. Thank you all. So you're all unmuted. Thank you for joining. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Great session.
Yes, it
I
was.
was trying
Thank
to
you.
get in touch with Mr. Oluijoshi. His line has been connecting since we started. It didn't connect. Connecting to audio since.
Is that the gentleman you talked about last week, Auntie?
No.
Another
This
one.
I just saw him now, Oluijoshi.
Oh, okay.
Since we started, it's been